Welcome into the Cody Broncos Podcast. I talk about the Denver Broncos on this channel, and here today I'm here to talk about what I graded each unit as in the Broncos win against the New Orleans Saints last night. But before we get into it, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already, leave a comment if you agree or disagree with my ratings, and let's dive right into it. So, quarterbacks, Bo Nix did not have to do much. Now, granted, his couple chances to make a really, really impactful throw that could have changed the trajectory of the game. Like if you do convert that pass on first down or on the first drive, the one that he sailed right in the middle between Kroll and Troy Franklin, then it's an entirely different ballgame, only 7 or 6 minutes into the contest or whatever it was. So you had a chance to come out with a quick dagger, and it continues to be an issue for him to start slow. If you are drafted to be the franchise quarterback of the Denver Broncos, you have to make that sort of throw, and that's completely fine. But honestly, I'm willing to kind of just, let it be, and because his couple chances to make an impact pass, he did not succeed. I have that in my notes here. But he did not really need to be, a hero or anything like that. He didn't need to have a game that was similar to the Tampa game he had. He didn't need to have a game that was similar to the Raiders game. And he finished the day 16 for 26, 164 yards, 0 touchdowns, no picks either. But one thing that really, really makes me happy is 10 carries for 75 yards, because more designed runs is going to keep the defenses honest. More designed runs. I want to see more of like what we saw last night, where Bo Nix ran to the left for a huge, I think, 30-yard gain. That was absolutely electric, and that was awesome. So I just want to see more of that. I hope that eventually with Bo Nix, we get to see more of that as well. But his scrambling ability has been really good so far. And I think it's kind of odd that Bo Nix is the complete, flipped upside down version of a prospect of what we all thought he'd be. We all thought that he was this hyper efficient, completion machine who couldn't throw deep. And it's kind of proving to be the opposite, because he is the NFL's rookie leader in big-time throws, even more so than Caleb Williams, even more so than Jane Daniels. So it's kind of been odd to watch that, and his running ability and his physical prowess and what he could become was completely, completely undersold, because a lot of people thought that he wasn't really this toolsy guy. He didn't have a lot of good traits, but the ability to keep the play alive with your legs is huge, huge, huge floor raiser for young quarterbacks. So that's good on him. And yeah, I gave him a C-. This is probably a different grade if the Broncos actually had to be in a game, but for better or for worse. But yeah, I couldn't really judge him just based off anything other than that first drive alone. And wasn't really thrilled with what I saw. Saw some very big improvements on the second drive as well, when he was finally able to set his feet, and he was able to fire some darts to Vele, to Kroll, to Franklin. But yeah. So running backs, A-. And the only reason this is not an A+ is because this could be a painful trend if not cleaned up. I'm talking about the fumbles, that is, because Audric Estime, he put the ball on the ground. Now, granted, the game was well out of reach at that point, and the Broncos ended up getting a turnover off that drive. But that's something that you want to clean up. Last week, obviously, you had the huge Javonte fumble against the Chargers, which was an absolute killer. But this week, Audric Estime had the fumble, and that's not good, because he has now fumbled on, I believe, 2 of his 9 carries in the NFL so far. But you know what? We're just willing to give that a pass as well, because most rushing yards in a game since 2013. So most rushing yards in a game since Peyton Manning was under center. Granted, we haven't had quite the dual threat quarterback ever since then that we have in Bo Nix. We probably never had anything like that. Well, maybe Tebow. But and obviously Elway, but old Javonte looks like he is back, which would be huge. That would be huge for this Broncos team that is kind of lacking in a lot of other areas of their structure. If we could get any semblance, I'd even take 80% of what old Javonte was, which looks like what we got last night. And because he's not dragging guys on his back at all like he used to be, but that would be absolutely massive if we could get this going. Every run tonight felt like it was going to go far, whether it was Javonte, whether it was Estime, whether it was Jaleel getting that 25-yard run. I thought anytime the Broncos touched the ball, I thought it was going to go for a first down, and that's a really unfamiliar feeling, especially because of how bad the run game has been this year. But Sean Payton, he did a great job tonight as far as his scheming. Yeah, like I said, fumbles could be a painful trend if not cleaned up. But yeah, if this if that fumble did not happen, this would have been an A+. So wide receivers, I'll give them a B. There wasn't much for the unit to do other than to, do a lot of that run blocking. They did have to sell some of those quarterback design runs, and they did a great job of that. And obviously they are a big part. A run game is an 11-person effort. And obviously I got to give them their credit for helping out in the run game as well, because that's a big part of the modern NFL. With all these defenses countering by having, too high, you need to be able to run the football, and that's going to be a big part of how this Broncos offense is going to work, especially while Nix is still working out his jitters. And it was nice to see Franklin and Bailey build some rapport with Nix and get some yards after the catch, because we haven't seen a lot of that. We haven't seen a lot of individual creation for the Broncos this year. And the Marvin Mims experience at wide receiver, it continues to be very, very strange. It continues to be very, very wild, especially because, you just think about what he did last night on 2 consecutive plays. He catches a third and 10, like a check down on 3rd and 10, and he breaks a tackle and he converts for a first down. That was absolutely incredible, and I want to see more of that. And honestly, I think that tackle breaking ability is what makes him such a good kickoff player, and kick returner and punt returner, and why he was an All-Pro last year. But the very next very next play on first down, he drops the easiest 1st and 10 I have ever seen, and the announcers called him out too. They were just like, you can't really throw it any better with anticipation by Nix. But yeah, so but it is huge for the guys to get some experience, to get some rapport, as I put it, before the mini bye week. And obviously Sutton with no catches and no targets will be interesting to monitor. I'm just willing to accept that this was probably a game where Sutton really wasn't a huge part, because obviously you had Lattimore on the boundary. Granted, he did end up getting hurt and did end up leaving in, I believe, the late 3rd, early 4th quarter. But regardless, once again, I'm not, overtly freaking out about Sutton or anything like that, because, yes, he is still the most important player in this room. But, yeah, I don't know. Josh Reynolds and Courtland Sutton are going to be the veterans that really have to mentor these young guys. And, yeah, I don't know. I just thought they played a fine game last night. Not much more needs to be said. So tight ends, B-. So also, there really wasn't a lot for this unit to do either. We were running the football down their throats. We weren't really needing to be impactful in the passing game. But for as little talent as we have at the position, Kroll and Adkins would never, ever, and Troutman would never get targets on any other teams. But this was about as impactful as we hope they could be. I think Kroll went 3 for 40. So nice. All right, that's about as impactful as we hope they can be. The Broncos now have 100 receiving yards from their tight ends this year. It took 6 games to do it, and that's embarrassingly bad production from that unit. But another thing is that Dulcich continues to be inactive, and I think a lot of that, you go back to the injuries last year, you go back to the fact that this was really his first full year in a Sean Payton offense, and he has not passed any of the tests at all. Particularly week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's when it was it really came to light that it was going to be really bad and real tough sledding for Dulcich to be an impactful player again. I wouldn't be surprised if towards the back half of the year we end up seeing him kind of be productive again, but rookie year Dulcich, it feels like a fever dream, a pipe dream at this point for him to ever get back to what he was. So offensive line, we're going to give him an A+. No sacks, 7 yards per carry. Nix had all day to throw sometimes, and also Garrett Bowles against Chase Young, who was 6th in the entire NFL in pressures coming into this week. Garrett Bowles allowed only 1 pressure against Chase Young in 20 pass blocking snaps. That is an absolutely great statistic. That shows you that Bowles was in his element all night long. And Mike McGlinchey, he had his best game in the orange and blue, because I have been heavily critical of the Mike McGlinchey contract and just the philosophy of signing him to begin with. And honestly, this looked like an entirely different offensive line, and the only thing that changed was the right tackle spot. So I'm really, really happy with Mike McGlinchey. Honestly, I think he deserves the game ball even over a guy like Cody Barton, which is going to be ludicrous for some to say, but McGlinchey and just being a difference maker tonight, this was why our run game was able to get going. And Alex Forsythe had a game at center. He was able to get to the second level so easily. And a lot of people have been asking what happens with Wattenberg when he comes back, because Alex Forsythe had probably, the best game of his young career and best game of the limited reps that he has seen so far at the National Football League level. So I'm really curious to see what happens with Wattenberg. Really happy with Forsythe, really happy with Zach Strife. and the strides that this unit has made. Garrett Bowles, it just makes me so happy to see him finally doing well. Miners obviously did Miners things. He was, helping running backs get 2 yards of push when a wall of defenders had them wrapped up. And yeah, I don't know. So defensive line, we're also going to give this unit an A+. And the big thing about tonight is that both sides of the trenches did really, really well. Zach Allen continues to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And he's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year just because other defensive players have more name recognition and have more to their NFL resume at this point. But Zach Allen, he has been absolutely incredible. Now, if Zach Allen finishes with a ridiculous number of sacks, I don't know, if he finishes with 17, 18, maybe come back to me and maybe we'll talk about it. But he is probably going to be first in the NFL in pressures, especially since Aiden Hutchinson, rest up, is now out for the year. So amongst active players, Zach Allen is probably going to be first after this week. And that just shows you that he continues to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and he has been what makes this Broncos defense work. He has been what makes this defensive line overhaul. He has been what's made it work over these past few days, or whole season actually. And Alvin Kamara, I have nothing to say other than 7 rushes, 10 rushing yards. Everybody on the interior showed up. John Franklin Myers got his sack. Malcolm Roach had that play where he dropped back into coverage, then did the seatbelt celebration after he kind of disrupted a pass. And the only thing I can really nick them on is DJ Jones being offsides over center, which negated that fumble play. I don't know if that ends up being the same play if it plays out or differently and we're not flagged or anything, but it probably does because I don't think Rattler noticed it after the snap that had happened. But regardless, the only thing I can really say about the defensive line is that DJ Jones jumped off sides, negated a big play. I don't know if there was any play to jump off sides on tonight, that was not the one. So edge department, I'm going to be a little surprising with my grade here. So if this was a different game, this is the unit I would have looked at and been like, okay, we probably needed more consistent down-to-down reps. Nick Bonito, he could have had 3 sacks. But Rattler evaded at least 2 of them that I counted, and he ran for huge gains on one of them. He ran for a 25-yard run that kind of put the Saints in field goal position. And Browning, he wasn't a factor in his return, but I don't know. I don't really care. I'm willing to give all the guys that came back for the first time tonight, I'm willing to kind of just be like, okay, this was a little bit of a weird game. The Saints were out of it, halfway through the game. So I don't really care that I don't remember seeing Browning actually on the field much. I think maybe a few times on third down on some design pass rushing downs, but whatever, just easing back into it. No big deal. Cooper, he also got some nice pressures. I saw him be able to hold his own on his side. But, either way, Jonah Ellis mainly played on special teams, it seemed like. So, yeah. Edge rushing unit, like I said, if this was an entirely different game, I probably would have looked at this unit and been like, okay, they needed to be more consistent, and they probably can't play like this. They probably can't have broken sacks. Because credit to them, they did have 6 sacks tonight. But you can't have broken sacks when you're going to go up against the Chiefs and Ravens 2 and 3 weeks from now. But yeah, so inside linebacker, A+. And there's nothing that needs to be said about this unit other than have a game Cody Barton. It was absolutely massive to have a game like that, especially because of last week. And I was very critical of him because he did get cooked by Kimani Vidal in his first career NFL snap on that wheel route. And, we didn't really need to see anything else from the rest of the unit. Cody Barton, he could have had 2 defensive touchdowns. He also could have had a pick. And honestly, I'm not really going to blame him because you don't really see inside linebackers cover downfield like that anymore. So it ended up being meaningless. Would you like to have seen him come down with that pick? Absolutely. But, I mean, we traded, Tyrann Mathieu, he dropped an easy pick. Cody Barton dropped an easy pick. Oh, well, Hammurabi's code. I can kind of forgive it. Now, we didn't really need to see anything else from the rest of the unit. Obviously, they did their part containing Alvin Kamara, so we got to give them an A+ on that. But defensive backs, we got to give them an A because they allowed quite a few quick outs, and that can be something that a team looks at on tape, and it's just like, all right, when we play against the Broncos, we can just obliterate them all game long with these quick outs. But other than that, coverage was rock solid. Riley Moss had a couple PBUs when he really needed to. And Riley Moss and J-Mac, they were up to the test with no Patrick Surtain. I hope we can get Patrick Surtain back on the field as soon as possible. But ultimately, if he can't go, Carolina is not a bad team to sit him out against. Granted, it's going to be a tougher test without Surtain because instead of Bub Means and Cedric Wilson, you are going to go up against Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette, who are much more respectable weapons. But regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the guys that are missing tonight, NFL teams still need to go out and perform regardless of circumstance. And you can nitpick and you could say, well, the Saints didn't have Chris Olave, didn't have Rashid Shaheed, they didn't have Taysom Hill either. And that's not invalid. That's not an invalid claim. But, you can only play who's in front of you at the National Football League level. The New Orleans Saints, they had National Football League caliber guys, even if they weren't the highest tier on the other side of the ball. And our guys were up to the challenge. So, yeah, like I said, you can nitpick and say Noah Olave / Shaheed, but it just goes both ways with that argument. And the unit, our DBs, they were great in run support as well. They were absolutely phenomenal in stopping the run. They all came down. Jaquan McMillan blew up a couple screens. PJ Locke came screaming down and tackled Alvin Kamara for a 7-yard loss. That was absolutely great. Just seeing guys able to execute like that and seeing the defense swarm to the ball. We didn't really see much of them, but there you go.